I let a stranger into my car, and 10 minutes later, my life stopped being mine. The rain came down hard that night, the kind that turns headlights into blinding halos and the road into a ribbon of glass. My windshield wipers struggled to keep up, thudding back and forth like a nervous heartbeat. I should have been focused on driving, on getting home after a 12-hour shift, on the quiet apartment waiting for me. But then I saw him, standing right there at the edge of the road. No umbrella, no jacket, just a dark silhouette under a flickering streetlight, completely still, like the storm didn't touch him. I slowed down without meaning to, my hands tightening on the wheel. Something about him felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just out of place, like he didn't belong in a world where people rushed to get out of the rain. I told myself to keep going. I even pressed my foot on the gas. But then he looked up, and our eyes met through the rain-streaked glass. I don't know why that mattered. I don't know why that made me hesitate. But it did, and hesitation was all it took. I pulled over, just for a second, just long enough to crack the window. "Hey, do you need a ride?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. He didn't answer right away, just watched me, like he was deciding something. Then he stepped closer, opened the passenger door without asking, and got in, water dripping from his clothes onto my seat. The air in the car changed instantly. Heavier, quieter, like something invisible had just locked the doors behind us. "Drive," he said, his voice low, steady, not a request. Not even close. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Every instinct I had whispered that I'd made a mistake, but I still shifted into gear, the car rolling forward into the rain. I tried to glance at him without being obvious. Early 30s maybe, sharp features, dark hair slicked back by the storm, and eyes, God. His eyes were calm in a way that didn't make sense, like nothing surprised him, like nothing ever would. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to sound normal, trying to pretend this was just another late-night favor for a stranger. He didn't look at me, just watched the road ahead. "Keep driving," he said again, and something in my chest tightened. I nodded even though he wasn't looking. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the rhythm of the rain against the roof. Then his phone buzzed, sharp and sudden. He answered it without hesitation. "Talk," he said. One word, cold, controlled. I couldn't hear the other side clearly, just a voice, rushed, tense, afraid. "Sir, they're close," the man continued. We lost track for a minute, but the line cut, my stomach dropped. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This wasn't normal. None of this was normal. I risked another glance, and that's when I saw it. A dark stain along his sleeve. Not big, not obvious, but enough. My breath caught. I looked back at the road quickly, heart starting to pound. "Are you okay?" I asked, and immediately regretted it. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to feel his gaze. "Just drive," he repeated, softer this time, but somehow more dangerous. I nodded again, my grip tightening, and then I saw them. Headlights in my rearview mirror. Too bright, too close, following every turn I made. I blinked, thinking it was just the storm playing tricks on my eyes. But they didn't fade. They got closer. My pulse spiked. "Are they following us?" I whispered. He didn't answer right away. Just watched the mirror, his expression unreadable. Then finally, almost like he was stating the weather, he said, "Yes." My heart slammed against my ribs, my fingers trembling on the wheel. "Who are you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his seat, completely calm, like none of this was urgent, like none of this was real, and said, "Someone you shouldn't have stopped for." The rain got louder, or maybe it was just my heartbeat trying to keep up. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, forcing my eyes to stay on the road, even though every instinct screamed at me to look back again. The headlights behind us did not fade. They stayed locked onto my car like they had chosen me, like they were not going anywhere. "I do not understand what is happening," I said, my voice unsteady, the words barely making it past the knot in my throat. He did not answer right away. He never rushed anything. That was what made him more unsettling. Everything about him felt measured, controlled, like he was always 3 steps ahead of whatever came next. "You are involved now," he said finally, his tone calm, almost quiet, like he was stating a fact that could not be changed. My stomach dropped. Involved in what? I wanted to ask, but I was not sure I wanted to hear the answer. The car behind us moved closer, too close, their lights filling my mirror. I flinched, my foot pressing the gas a little harder without thinking. "Do not panic," he said, and something in his voice cut through the fear. Not comforting, not gentle, just certain. I swallowed and nodded, even though he was not looking at me. "Take the next right," he added. I hesitated for half a second, my mind flashing with every warning I had ever been taught. Do not trust strangers. Do not change your route. Do not let anyone control your direction. But then the headlights behind us flared even brighter, and fear made the decision for me. I turned the wheel, the tires sliding slightly on the wet asphalt before catching again. My breath came faster, shallow, uneven. "Good," he murmured, and I hated that the word made me feel steadier, like I needed his approval to keep going. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned back slightly, his eyes flicking to the mirror, then to the road, then back again, always watching, always calculating. "People who do not like losing," he said, and that was not an answer, not really, but it was enough to make my pulse spike even higher. His phone buzzed again. He answered instantly. "Location," he said. The voice on the other end spoke quickly, too low for me to catch everything, but I heard enough. "Coordinates, timing, urgency, 5 minutes," he replied, then ended the call without another word. 5 minutes for what? I wanted to ask, but the question died in my chest as the car behind us surged forward, pulling up alongside for a second before falling back again. Like they were testing me, like they were deciding how far I would go. My hands trembled. I tightened them on the wheel until my knuckles ached. "I cannot do this," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "You already are," he replied, and there was no edge in his voice, no threat, just truth, and somehow that made it worse. I shook my head, my vision narrowing, the rain, the lights, the road all blurring together. "I was just trying to help," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He turned his head then, really looked at me for the first time since he got in the car, and for a split second, something in his expression shifted, not softer, not exactly, but different, like he saw something in me he had not expected. "I know," he said quietly, and those two words hit harder than anything else, because they sounded almost human, almost real. The road ahead opened up into a wider stretch, empty except for the storm, and then, in the distance, I saw them, dark shapes, cars, more than one, waiting, positioned like they had been expecting us. My breath caught. "What is that?" I asked, my voice shaking again. He followed my gaze, then leaned forward slightly, his presence suddenly sharper, more focused. "That," he said, his voice dropping just enough to make the air feel colder, "is where your life changes." My foot hovered over the brake, my mind screaming at me to stop, to turn around, to get out of this before it went any further. But the cars ahead did not look like an option. They looked like a wall, dark, still, waiting, and the headlights behind us were still there, pressing closer, boxing me in from both sides. "Slow down," he said, calm as ever, like we were not seconds away from something I could not understand. I shook my head, panic rising in my chest. "If I stop, they will reach us," I said, my voice breaking. He glanced at me, just once, and there it was again, that unreadable calm. "If you do not stop, they will chase you until you crash," he replied, and the certainty in his voice made my stomach twist. I eased off the gas, my car slowing as the rain softened just enough to reveal the shapes ahead more clearly. 3 black vehicles, lined across the road like they belonged there, like they owned the space. My breath came shallow, uneven. "What do I do?" I whispered, and I hated how much I needed him to answer. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp now, focused. "You stay exactly where you are," he said, and for the first time, his tone shifted, not colder, not harsher, just protective, like he had decided something about me. I swallowed, my hands trembling on the wheel as I brought the car to a stop about 20 feet away from them, the engine idling, the rain tapping softly now, like the storm itself was holding its breath. The car behind us slowed too, keeping distance, waiting. Everything felt suspended, like time had stretched thin and fragile. Then, one of the cars ahead moved, just slightly, a door opening, a figure stepping out, tall, composed, walking toward us without hurry. My pulse pounded in my ears. "I cannot do this," I whispered again, my fingers slipping slightly on the wheel. He reached out then, not grabbing, not forcing, just placing his hand lightly over mine for half a second, steady, warm, grounding. "Look at me," he said, and I did, because I could not his eyes locked onto mine, dark, controlled. But there was something else there now, something I had not seen before. "You are not their target," he said quietly. "You were just there." Just there. Like that explained everything. Like that made this any less terrifying. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "That does not make me safe," I said, my voice barely holding together. His hand pulled back slowly, like he had already given more than he intended. "No," he admitted, and that single word felt heavier than anything else. Honest, unfiltered. "It does not." The man outside stopped a few feet from my car, rain sliding off his coat as he looked directly at us. Or at him. Not me. Never me. I felt invisible and exposed at the same time. "Stay in the car," he said softly. And then he reached for the door handle. My breath caught. "Wait." I blurted out, the word escaping before I could stop it. He paused, just for a second, glancing back at me. And in that moment, everything felt different, like this was the edge of something I could not step back from. "If you leave," I said, my voice shaking, "what happens to me?" He studied me. Really studied me. Like he was weighing the answer, like it mattered more than it should. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible exhale. "That depends," he said, his voice low, steady. "On whether they believe you were just helping or something more." My heart dropped. The door opened, and as he stepped out into the rain, he added, almost as an afterthought, "And I do not think they believe in accidents." The door closed behind him with a quiet, final sound that echoed louder than anything else in that moment. And suddenly the car felt too small, too exposed, like I had been left behind in a place I did not belong. I watched through the rain-streaked windshield as he walked forward, unhurried, shoulders relaxed, like he was not stepping into something dangerous, but into something familiar. The man approaching from the other side stopped a few feet away from him, their silhouettes meeting in the glow of headlights and streetlight reflections. I could not hear what they were saying, not clearly, just low voices carried by the rain, controlled, measured, like two people who understood each other without needing to raise their tone. My hands stayed frozen on the steering wheel, my breathing shallow, my mind racing through every possible outcome and finding none that ended with me going home. The car behind me remained still, engine running, lights on, waiting, everything was waiting, and I was in the middle of it without knowing why. I leaned forward slightly, straining to catch a word, a name, anything, but all I saw was the way the stranger I had picked up stood, straight, calm, completely unaffected, like he was the only person here who was not reacting to the tension in the air. And that scared me more than anything else, because people like that did not exist in normal life, not in mine. A second figure stepped out from one of the cars ahead, then another, all moving with the same quiet precision, forming a loose line behind the man he was speaking to, not threatening, not aggressive, just present, and somehow that made it worse. I swallowed hard, my throat dry despite everything, and for the first time, I realized something that made my chest tighten even more. They were not looking at me, not directly, not yet, but they knew I was there. I could feel it, the awareness. Like a shadow pressing against the edges of the car, reminding me that I was part of this whether I wanted to be or not. The stranger tilted his head slightly, saying something I could not hear, and the man in front of him let out a short breath, almost like a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. Not really, just recognition, like this was expected, like this meeting had been inevitable. A flash of movement caught my eye as one of the cars behind me shifted slightly, repositioning, not closer, not farther, just adjusting, like they were sealing something invisible around us. I gripped the wheel tighter, my fingers aching. "Just stay calm," I whispered to myself. But the words did not help. Nothing about this felt calm. Nothing about this felt safe. And then, without warning, the stranger turned his head, just enough to glance back at my car, at me, our eyes meeting again through the glass. And for a second, everything else faded. The rain, the cars, the people, all of it disappeared. And there was just that look, steady, certain, like he was checking if I was still there, if I was still holding together. And somehow, That was the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. He held that look for a fraction longer than necessary, then turned back to the man in front of him. The conversation shifting, the air tightening again. I could feel it. Something was changing. Something was about to happen. Not loud, not explosive, but decisive. Like a door closing somewhere I could not see. And I realized then that whatever this was, whatever line I had crossed the moment I stopped my car in the rain, there was no stepping back across it. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Because when he finally spoke again, louder this time, just enough for me to hear a single word carried through the storm, it was not a name, not a threat, just one word, simple and absolute. Mine. The word did not echo. It settled, heavy, final, like it belonged there long before I ever arrived. Mine. I felt it in my chest more than I heard it. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel until they hurt. My breath catching as everything outside the car shifted in a way I could not fully see, but could feel. The man in front of him went still, not surprised, not confused, just accepting, like. That word carried weight I did not understand yet, like it meant something in a world I had accidentally stepped into. The rain softened to a steady whisper against the glass, and for a moment, everything looked almost calm, almost normal, except nothing about this was normal. Not the cars, not the people, not him, the stranger who had stepped into my life like he had always been meant to. He said something else, quieter now, and the man in front of him nodded once, sharp, deliberate, then stepped back, just enough to break whatever line had formed between them. The others behind him followed, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving as one, like they were used to this, like this was routine. My pulse slowed slightly, confusion mixing with the fear. Was it over? Was I supposed to just drive away now? Pretend none of this had happened? Pretend I had not heard that word? Pretend I had not been seen? I swallowed hard, my mind searching for something to hold on to, something familiar. But there was nothing, just the sound of rain and the low hum of engines. Then he turned again, walking back toward my car, and suddenly my heart started racing all over again, faster this time. Because now it was not the unknown I feared, it was him. The way he moved, steady, controlled, like everything had just gone exactly the way he expected. He reached the passenger door and opened it without hesitation, sliding back into the seat beside me like he had never left, bringing that same quiet weight with him. The door closed, sealing us back inside together. And for a second, neither of us spoke. I could feel the heat of his presence, the calm in his breathing, the complete absence of panic. Like this was just another moment in a long line of moments he had already survived. I forced myself to look at him, really look this time, and the question came out before I could stop it. What did you mean? My voice was soft, fragile, but it carried everything I was feeling, confusion, fear, disbelief. He did not answer right away. Of course he did not. He never did anything quickly. His gaze shifted to me, steady, unreadable, and for a second, I thought he might ignore the question completely, like everything else, but then he spoke. Low, certain. It means they will not touch you, he said, and my chest tightened, relief flickering for a brief, fragile second before the rest of his words settled in. Because I told them not to. The air left my lungs slowly, my grip loosening just enough to remind me how hard I had been holding on. You can just tell them that? I asked, disbelief creeping into my voice. He held my gaze. And there was no arrogance in it. No need to prove anything. Just quiet truth. Yes, he said. And that single word answered more than anything else could have. Silence fell again. Heavier this time. Filled with everything I was starting to understand. Everything I did not want to understand. I shook my head slightly, trying to process it. Trying to place him somewhere in my world where he made sense. But there was no place for him. There, not anymore. Who are you? I asked again, softer this time, like maybe if I said it differently, I would get a different answer. He watched me for a long moment, like he was deciding how much to give, how much to take. Then his lips moved, just enough to form the words that would change everything. Adrian Volkov, he said, and even if I did not recognize the name, the way he said it made it feel like I should have, like it carried weight I could not yet measure. I swallowed, my heart steady but heavy now. And what happens now? I asked, barely above a whisper. He leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. And there it was again, that shift, that quiet claim wrapped in something that felt almost protective. almost inevitable. Now, he said slowly, you keep driving. I did not argue. I did not ask where. I just pressed my foot on the gas like my body had already decided before my mind could catch up. The car rolled forward slowly at first, then steadier, passing the line of black vehicles as if they were just parked on a quiet street and not something that had just changed everything about my night, about my life. I kept my eyes forward, but I could feel them, all of them, watching, not hostile, not aggressive, just aware, like I had been marked in a way I could not see. The moment we passed them, the road opened again, empty, dark, the rain easing into a soft drizzle that made everything feel unreal, like I had stepped out of one world and into another without noticing the exact moment it happened. I exhaled slowly, my hands still trembling slightly on the wheel. Where am I taking you? I asked, my voice quieter now, not because I was calmer, but because something in me had shifted, like I already knew the answer would not be simple. He sat beside me, relaxed, composed, like nothing we had just gone through had required any effort at all. Straight, he said, his tone even, controlled. I nodded, focusing on the road, the yellow line stretching ahead like a path I had not chosen but was now committed to. Silence settled between us again, but it was different this time, heavier, filled with everything I was starting to understand and everything I was trying not to. I glanced at him briefly, then back at the road. They listened to you, I said, the realization still not fully landing. He did not react, did not confirm or deny, just watched the passing lights outside the window. They always do, he replied after a moment, and there was no pride in his voice, just certainty, like gravity, like something that did not need to be questioned. I swallowed, my thoughts racing, trying to piece together what kind of man could walk into a situation like that and walk out untouched. What kind of life required that kind of control? Are you dangerous? I asked, the question slipping out before I could filter it. He turned his head slightly, his gaze settling on me, and for a second, I regretted asking, not because of fear, but because I was not sure I was ready for the truth. Not to you, he said, and the way he said it made my chest tighten, because it sounded less like reassurance and more like a decision. I looked back at the road, my heart beating slower now, but heavier. You cannot promise that, I murmured, more to myself than to him. He did not respond, but I could feel his eyes on me for a moment longer before they shifted away again. The city lights began to appear in the distance, faint at first, then clearer, buildings rising out of the darkness like something familiar, something normal, but it did not feel the same anymore. Nothing did. I tightened my grip on the wheel again, grounding myself, reminding myself that this was still my car, my life, my choices, even if they no longer felt like mine. You said I am not safe. I continued, my voice steadier now. What does that mean? He leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable, like he had already thought through this part, like he had already decided what came next. It means, he said slowly, that the moment you stopped for me, you stepped into something you cannot step out of. My breath caught, the words settling into me like cold air, sharp, undeniable. I shook my head, instinctively rejecting it. That is not fair, I said, my voice rising just slightly. He glanced at me again, and there was something there this time, something almost human, almost understanding, but it did not change anything. No, he agreed quietly. It is not. The simplicity of it, the honesty, made it harder to argue, harder to push back, because he was not trying to convince me. He was just telling me the truth. I exhaled slowly, my chest tight, my thoughts spinning. So what am I supposed to do? I asked, and this time, the question felt real, not panicked, not desperate, just lost. He watched me for a long second, then looked ahead, his voice calm, steady, like he had been waiting for me to ask. You stay close to me, he said, and the words were not loud, not forceful, but they carried weight, the kind that did not leave room for alternatives, because whether you realize it or not, he added, his gaze shifting back to me, locking in place, they are already watching you now. The word watching did not leave my head. It stayed there, looping, echoing, stretching into something bigger than it should have been. I glanced at the rearview mirror again without meaning to, half expecting to see headlights still following us, but the road behind was empty now, just wet asphalt reflecting streetlights like broken glass. No one is there. I said quietly, more to convince myself than him. He did not even look back. They do not need to follow you closely, he replied, his voice calm, almost distant, like he was explaining something simple, something obvious. I swallowed, my fingers tightening again on the wheel. Then how do you know? I asked, and this time there was a small pause, just enough to feel intentional, like he was deciding how much truth I could handle at once. Because I would be, he said, and that answer sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the rain. I did not respond. I could not, because suddenly everything I had thought was normal felt fragile, like it could break if I looked at it too closely. The city lights grew brighter as we got closer. Familiar streets starting to form, intersections I recognized, buildings I had passed 100 times without thinking. But tonight they felt different, like I was seeing them from the outside, like I no longer fully belonged here. Turn left, he said, and I did without questioning, my body moving before my mind caught up again. We drove in silence for another minute, maybe two, the kind of silence that was not empty but full, heavy with things unsaid, things I was starting to understand without wanting to. You should let me go, I said. Finally, my voice steady but quiet. I kept my eyes on the road, not daring to look at him when I said it. I can just drop you off somewhere and forget all of this. The words sounded weak even to me. Unrealistic, like a child trying to undo something that had already happened. He did not respond immediately, and that silence told me more than any answer could have. You will not forget, he said eventually, and I closed my eyes for half a second. Because he was right, I already knew that. Then I will try. I insisted, a little stronger this time. Like maybe effort could change reality. Like maybe wanting something enough could make it true. He turned his head slowly, his gaze settling on me again, steady, patient, almost curious. And if they do not let you? He asked, and the question landed harder than anything else he had said, because I did not have an answer. I had not even thought that far. I shook my head slightly, my breath catching. Why me? I asked, the question finally breaking through everything else. There were probably 100 other cars on that road tonight. He watched me for a long second, and this time, something in his expression shifted again, something quieter, more thoughtful, like he was considering something beyond the obvious. But you were the one who stopped, he said, and the simplicity of it made my chest tighten, because it was true, painfully, undeniably true. I had made that choice, no one else. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders sinking just a little, the weight of that decision settling into me fully for the first time. I was just trying to help. I whispered again, softer now, not as a defense, but as a realization. He nodded slightly, almost to himself. I know, he said, and there it was again, that same tone, not mocking, not dismissive, just acknowledging something real, something rare. We turned onto a quieter street, lined with trees and dim lights, the kind of place where nothing ever happened, where everything felt safe, normal, untouched, and suddenly that normal felt like something I was losing, something slipping through my fingers without me being able to hold on to it. I slowed the car slightly, my chest tight, my thoughts spinning. This is my street, I said, the words coming out automatically, like part of me still believed I could just go home, park, walk inside, and wake up tomorrow like none of this had happened. He did not respond right away, and that silence told me everything. I glanced at him, finally, and saw the way he was looking at the street, not casually, not passively, but carefully, analyzing, calculating, like he was already seeing things I could not. And then he said, quietly, almost gently, then tonight, it stops being just your street. His words settled into the quiet street like something permanent, something that did not belong but was not leaving. I slowed the car even more, my apartment building coming into view at the end of the block, the same building I had walked into every night for the past 3 years, the same dim porch light, the same cracked sidewalk, the same sense of routine that used to feel safe. But tonight it looked different, smaller somehow, like it could not hold the version of me sitting in this car anymore. You are wrong, I said softly, more to hold on to something than to argue. This is still my street. He did not answer right away, his eyes scanning the parked cars, the shadows between buildings, the quiet windows that showed no sign of life. Not because no one was there, but because everyone was inside, unaware, untouched. Stop the car, he said finally, calm, precise. I hesitated, my fingers tightening again. Why? I asked, my voice barely steady. He turned to me, and there was something different in his expression now. Not softer, not colder, just focused in a way that made my chest tighten. Because if you keep driving, you will pretend this can go back to normal, he said, and the truth in it hit harder than anything else. I swallowed, my foot easing off the gas until the car rolled to a stop in front of my building, the engine idling. The rain now nothing more than a light whisper against the windshield. For a moment, neither of us moved, the world outside quiet, unchanged, and yet everything inside me felt completely different. So what now? I asked, the question coming out smaller than I wanted. He leaned back slightly, his gaze shifting from me to the building and back again. Calculating, always calculating. Now we see if they are already here, he said, and my breath caught instantly, my heart jumping back into my throat. Here? I repeated, the word barely forming. He nodded once, like it was the most logical possibility. If I were them, I would not wait. He added, and that sentence made my stomach drop in a way nothing else had. I looked at my building again, really looked this time. The dark windows, the quiet entrance, the familiar door that suddenly felt like it might not be mine anymore. I do not see anything, I said quickly, too quickly, like if I said it fast enough it would be true. He did not argue, did not dismiss it, just watched, his eyes moving slowly across every detail I would have missed. Then he opened his door again, stepping out into the damp night air. My heart skipped, panic rising again. Wait, I said, louder this time, the word catching in my throat. He paused, turning back slightly. Do not get out, he said, his tone firm now. Not a suggestion, not optional. I nodded automatically, even as every part of me wanted to follow, wanted to not be alone in the car with everything spinning in my head. He closed the door and moved a few steps away, not far, just enough to see the building from a different angle, his presence still close enough to feel. I watched him through the glass, my breath shallow, my thoughts loud, the seconds stretching longer than they should have. Nothing moved, nothing changed. The street stayed quiet, the building still, and yet I could not shake the feeling that something was off, something I could not name. Then he turned back, walking toward the car again, his expression unreadable, my pulse racing as he reached for the door, opened it, and slid back into the seat beside me. Well? I asked immediately, unable to stop myself. He looked at me for a long second, and for the first time since I met him, there was something unmistakable in his eyes. Not fear, not even concern, but recognition, like a piece of a puzzle had just fallen into place. They are not here yet, he said slowly, and the relief hit me instantly, my shoulders dropping just slightly, my breath easing, but it did not last, because he did not look away, and his next words came quieter, heavier, like they mattered even more, which means, he continued, his gaze locking onto mine, steady, certain, they are waiting for you to walk inside. The words did not feel real at first. They hung in the air between us, quiet, almost calm, but my body reacted before my mind could catch up. My chest tightened, my fingers curling against the steering wheel as I stared at my building like I had never seen it before. Waiting for me? I repeated, my voice barely steady. He did not look away, did not soften it. Yes, he said, and that single word settled deeper than anything else tonight, because it meant this was not random anymore, not coincidence. This was already planned. I shook my head instinctively, my breath quickening. That does not make sense, I said. But even as I spoke, doubt crept in, because nothing about tonight had made sense from the moment I stopped my car. He leaned back slightly, his gaze still fixed on me, calm, certain. It does if they know you helped me, he replied, and my stomach dropped, the weight of that truth pressing down harder than before. I looked back at the building, at the quiet entrance, the dim light above the door flickering. Just slightly, something I had never noticed before, something that now felt like a signal instead of a flaw. So what? I just sit here? I asked, my voice sharper now, panic starting to push through the shock. I cannot just stay in my car all night. He did not react to the edge in my tone. Did not match it, he never did. No, he said simply. You do not stay. I blinked, confusion cutting through the fear for a second. Then what do? I asked, and this time the question felt heavier, because I knew whatever answer came next would change something again. He studied me for a moment, like he was measuring more than just my words, like he was deciding something deeper. Then he spoke, slow, deliberate. "You do not go inside alone," he said, and my breath caught, the meaning clear before I could even process it fully. I shook my head immediately, instinctive. "No," I said, the word coming out faster than anything else tonight. "No, that is not happening." He did not argue, did not push, just watched me, waiting, and somehow that made it harder, because he was not forcing anything. He was letting me reach the conclusion myself. I looked at my building again, really looked this time. The shadows near the entrance, the dark window on the second floor that I knew belonged to Mrs. Green, but looked empty now. The stillness that felt too perfect, too quiet, like something was missing, or maybe like something was hidden. My heart pounded louder, my thoughts racing. "You said they might be waiting," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He nodded once. "I said they would not wait forever," he corrected, and that small difference made everything worse, because it meant time mattered. It meant every second I sat here was part of something I could not see. I swallowed hard, my resistance cracking just slightly. "And if I do not go in?" I asked, my voice quieter now, less certain. He leaned forward just a little, his presence sharper again, more focused. "Then they will find another way to reach you," he said, and there was no threat in his tone, no drama, just truth, plain and unavoidable. I closed my eyes for a brief second, the weight of everything pressing in, the choice that did not feel like a choice at all. When I opened them again, I looked at him, really looked this time, at the man who had stepped into my car like a stranger and was now sitting beside me like something far more complicated. "And going in with you changes that?" I asked, and for the first time, there was a slight shift in his expression, something almost certain, almost final. "Yes," he said, and I felt it, the difference in that word, the weight, the promise, the control. I exhaled slowly, my grip loosening just enough to feel the tremor in my hands, my gaze drifting back to the building one last time before returning to him. "Then you are coming with me," I said, and even as the words left my mouth, I realized something had already changed, because I was no longer asking, I was accepting, and when he gave the smallest nod in response, like this had always been the outcome, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. I was not walking back into my old life. I was walking forward into his. I did not realize I was holding my breath until I reached for the door handle and my hand hesitated, just for a second, just long enough to feel the weight of what I was about to do. This was my building, my routine, my life, and yet opening that door felt like stepping into something unfamiliar, something that did not belong to me anymore. "Stay close," Adrian said quietly, and I nodded without looking at him, because I already knew I would. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool night air, the rain barely there now, just a faint mist clinging to the pavement. The street was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that made every small sound feel louder than it should be. My footsteps, the soft click of the car door closing behind me, his presence just a step away, steady, controlled. I did not look back to see if he was following. I could feel it, the space between us small enough to feel intentional, not accidental. We walked toward the entrance together, side by side, but not quite equal. I realized that without needing to think about it, the closer we got, the more everything felt sharper, the shadows near the doorway, the reflection in the glass, even the flicker of that old porch light. All of it seemed more defined, more important, like details I had ignored before were suddenly trying to tell me something. I slowed slightly as we reached the door, my hand hovering over the handle again, my chest tight. "This is a mistake," I whispered, not sure if I was saying it to him or to myself. He did not answer, not right away, and that silence made the moment stretch, made the decision heavier. Then he spoke, low and certain. "No," he said, "the mistake was thinking you could walk away from this alone." I swallowed hard, my fingers finally closing around the handle, the metal cold under my touch. I pushed the door open, and the familiar hallway greeted me. Dim lights, worn carpet, the faint hum of an old building that had seen too many quiet nights. It looked exactly the same, and yet it did not feel the same, not with him stepping in behind me, not with the awareness that I was no longer just another resident walking home. The door closed softly behind us, and the sound echoed longer than it should have. I stood there for a second, listening, my breath shallow, my senses sharper than they had ever been. "Do you see anything?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He moved slightly ahead of me, his gaze scanning the hallway, every door, every shadow, every corner. "Not yet," he said, and those two words did not comfort me the way I wanted them to, because they carried a promise that something could still be there, something just out of sight. I took a step forward, then another, my apartment at the end of the hall suddenly feeling much farther away than usual, every step deliberate, careful, like the floor itself might shift under me. Halfway down the hall, I noticed something small, almost nothing, but enough. My door, it was not fully closed, just slightly off, like it had not latched properly. My heart stopped for a second, my breath catching in my throat. "I always lock it," I whispered, the words barely forming. Adrian did not react with surprise, did not question it. He simply looked at the door, then at me. His expression calm but sharper now, more focused. "Stay behind me," he said, and for the first time, his voice carried something different. Not just control, but intention. I nodded immediately, my body responding before my mind could, as he stepped forward, closing the distance between us and that door that was no longer just mine. The hallway felt smaller, quieter, the air heavier, and as we stopped just a few feet away, I realized something that made my chest tighten all over again. Whatever was waiting on the other side, it had already been inside my life before I even knew it existed. My heart pounded so loud I was sure anyone inside could hear it, each beat echoing in my ears as I stared at the slight gap in my door, something so small, so ordinary, and yet it felt like the most dangerous thing I had ever seen. Adrian moved first, not fast, not reckless, just deliberate, every step controlled as he closed the distance. His presence in front of me creating a barrier I had not asked for, but did not question. I stayed close behind him like he told me to, close enough to feel the steadiness in his movement, to borrow it, because mine was gone, completely gone. He reached the door and paused for a fraction of a second, not hesitation, calculation. Then he pushed it open slowly, the hinges barely making a sound. The apartment beyond looked exactly the same at first glance. The couch where I left it, the small lamp in the corner still on, casting that warm yellow light I always forgot to turn off. Everything looked untouched, normal, and that was what made my stomach twist, because it should not have looked normal, not after everything he said, not after everything I had felt. "Stay here," he said quietly, his voice low but firm. I froze just behind the doorway, my breath shallow, watching as he stepped inside like he already belonged there. Like this space that had always been mine meant nothing to him. His eyes moved across the room quickly but carefully, taking in every detail, every shadow, every corner. I followed his gaze without moving, my chest tight, waiting for something to shift, something to reveal itself, but nothing did. The room stayed still, silent, too silent. "Do you notice anything different?" he asked without turning back, his voice calm, steady. I shook my head automatically, then realized he could not see me. "No," I whispered, my voice barely there. He took another step forward, his attention shifting to the kitchen, then to the hallway that led to my bedroom, his movements precise, measured, like he was piecing together something invisible. I forced myself to step inside, just one step, then another, the familiar scent of my apartment wrapping around me, grounding and unsettling at the same time, because it felt like mine. But it did not feel safe anymore. "I locked this door," I said again, louder this time, needing him to understand, needing this to make sense. He nodded slightly, still scanning. "I believe you," he said, and that simple acknowledgement did not comfort me the way I thought it would. It made everything worse, because it meant he accepted the implication without question. My gaze drifted to the coffee table, to my keys sitting exactly where I had left them, my bag on the chair, my shoes by the door. Everything in place, untouched, and yet something was wrong. I could feel it, like a pressure in the air, like the room itself was holding something back. "There is nothing here," I said, more to convince myself than him. He finally turned to look at me, and there was something in his expression that made my breath catch. Not relief, not surprise, just confirmation. "There is," he said quietly. "You just cannot see it yet." My stomach dropped, my fingers curling slightly at my sides. "Then what are we looking for?" I asked, my voice shaking despite everything. He held my gaze for a second, then looked past me, toward the door, toward the hallway outside, and something in his posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Not what? He said slowly, his voice lowering just enough to make the air feel heavier. Who? A soft sound echoed from somewhere beyond the apartment. Not loud, not clear, just enough to break the silence. My breath caught instantly, my eyes widening as I turned toward the door, my heart racing all over again. Did you hear that? I whispered, but I already knew the answer, because Adrian was no longer looking at me, his attention fixed on the entrance, his body still, ready, like he had been expecting this moment all along. And then, just as quietly as it began, the sound came again, closer this time, followed by a single, deliberate knock on my door. The knock was not loud, but it was precise, controlled, like whoever stood on the other side knew exactly what they were doing. My entire body froze, every muscle tightening as the sound echoed through the apartment. Once, then silence, heavy and waiting. I could hear my own breathing. Too fast, too shallow, my eyes locked on the door like it might open on its own. Do not move, Adrian said quietly, his voice low but firm, and I nodded even though he was not looking at me, because I could not have moved even if I wanted to. Another knock followed, slightly slower this time, deliberate, patient, like they were not in a hurry, like they knew I was already here. My heart pounded harder, each beat louder than the last. Maybe it is just a neighbor, I whispered, the words sounding weak even to me. Desperate. Adrian did not respond to that, did not entertain it, his gaze fixed on the door, his posture shifting just enough to tell me everything I needed to know. He was not surprised. He was not guessing. He had expected this. They know you are inside, he said after a moment, his tone calm, certain, and that certainty made my chest tighten even more. I shook my head slightly, my thoughts racing. How could they know? I asked, my voice trembling despite my effort to control it. He glanced at me briefly, and there it was again, that look, like I was asking the wrong question. Because they do not leave things unfinished, he replied, and something about the way he said it made the air feel colder, heavier, like the room had shrunk around us. The silence returned for a second, stretched thin, then a voice came from the other side of the door, calm, polite, almost casual. Miss Carter, my breath caught. Instantly, my heart skipping as I stared at Adrian. My name. They knew my name. We just want to talk. The voice continued, steady, controlled, like this was a normal conversation and not something that made my entire body feel like it was shutting down. I shook my head instinctively, stepping back without realizing it. No, I whispered, barely able to form the word. Adrian's gaze shifted to me, sharp now, focused. Do not answer, he said quietly, and I nodded again, gripping the edge of the table beside me just to stay grounded. The voice outside did not change, did not grow impatient. You helped someone tonight, it said, and my chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. We just need to understand why. I closed my eyes for a second, the weight of that sentence pressing down on me, because it was true. I had helped him, I had made that choice, and now it was echoing back at me from the other side of my own door. Adrian moved slightly closer, not touching me, not blocking me, just there, solid, present. Listen to me, he said, his voice lower now, more focused than before. They are testing you. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Testing what? I asked, barely above a whisper. He held my gaze for a second, and there was no hesitation in his answer. Whether you will stand alone or with me. The words settled into me, heavy, undeniable. Outside, the voice spoke again, just as calm, just as patient. You do not have to be afraid, it said, and that almost made it worse, because fear was the only honest thing in the room right now. I looked at the door again, then back at Adrian, my heart racing, my thoughts spinning, my choice no longer something distant, no longer something I could delay. It was here, right now, in this moment. And when the voice added one final sentence, soft but clear, it erased any illusion I had left. Open the door, Emily. I felt something inside me shift, not disappear, not calm, but change, because for the first time since this night began, I understood one thing completely. This was not about getting out anymore. This was about choosing a side. I did not move right away. I could feel the choice sitting in my chest, heavy, impossible to ignore, the door in front of me, Adrian beside me, the voice outside waiting with a patience that felt more dangerous than any threat. My fingers trembled slightly at my sides as I forced myself to breathe, slow, steady, like I could still control something in this moment. Emily. The voice called again, softer this time, almost understanding, and that was what made it worse, because it sounded reasonable, it sounded safe, it sounded like a way out. I closed my eyes for half a second, my mind flashing through everything that had happened, the rain, the road, the headlights, his voice telling me to drive, the way everything had shifted the moment I let him into my car. And then I opened my eyes and looked at Adrian, really looked at him, at the man who had never once raised his voice, never once panicked, never once tried to convince me with anything but the truth. And for the first time, I realized something that settled deeper than fear. He had never lied to me, not once. If I open that door, I whispered, my voice barely holding together, I cannot take it back. He did not answer immediately, his gaze steady, locked onto mine, and there was something in it now, not pressure, not control, just certainty. No, he said quietly, you cannot. The honesty in it made my chest tighten, but it also cleared something that had been tangled in doubt and fear since the beginning. I turned back to the door, my heart still racing, but different now, less scattered, more focused. The silence stretched for a second, then two, and I could feel them waiting on the other side, expecting me to hesitate, expecting me to fold. I took a step forward, my hand lifting slowly, not toward the handle, but toward the lock, and I pressed it firmly into place, the soft click echoing louder than anything else in the room. Behind me, I felt Adrian's attention sharpen, not surprised, not relieved, just aware, like something had just shifted exactly where it was supposed to. I am not opening it, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, stronger than I felt, the words settling into the room like a line I could not uncross. The voice outside went quiet for a moment, just long enough to feel the change. Then it spoke again, still calm, still controlled, but different now. That is a mistake, it said, and I almost smiled, just a little, because I had heard that word before tonight. I had felt it, lived it, and I understood it better now than I ever had. I shook my head slightly, my eyes staying on the door. No, I said softly. The mistake was stopping my car. The silence that followed was heavier, thicker, like something had shifted on their side too, like the game had changed. I took a slow breath, my shoulders lowering just slightly, and then I turned back, not to the door, but to Adrian, meeting his gaze without hesitation this time. So what happens now? I asked, and the question was no longer afraid. It was real, grounded, inevitable. He watched me for a long second, and for the first time, there was something in his expression that felt almost like approval, not pride, not possession, just recognition, like I had crossed a line he knew I would reach eventually. Now, he said slowly, his voice low, steady, you stay with me. The words settled into me, heavy but clear, and outside, the quiet footsteps began to fade, not rushed, not chaotic, just leaving, like they had heard everything they needed to hear, like they had accepted my answer without argument. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence return, feeling the weight of what I had chosen settle fully into place, and as I looked at him again, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. I had not just chosen to stay safe, I had chosen him, and somehow, I knew that was the part that would change everything.